Okay, בסדר. So last time we started looking at the release of debt, and we'll go more into the aspect of debt today and look at that. But beforehand, I wanted to know if any of you was able to access the song by Meir Ariel, Midrash Yonati. If you were able to listen to it, if you read any of the words, if you had any comments.
Well, I think the description of it said that the Hebrew is very dense and hard to translate, and that's what I inferred from the translation. I feel like I was missing a lot, but yeah, the general tenor of it was clear.
Yeah, and do you want to? Was there anything you saw from that song about Shemitah or about relationship? Like, why does he bring the Shemitah into that poem suddenly? I'll try bringing it up here on the
Well,
screen as we talk.
I mean,
See
he's
if I can.
pointing out the contradiction between the teaching of Shemitah and this thirst for acquiring land.
And what does he tell us about the thirst for acquiring land and the thirst for ownership? What does it do? Like, because I think he gives like Meir Ariel gives a spirit, like the song goes into a spiritual place about acquiring or ownership of land. What does he tell us, in your opinion?
I don't remember the specifics of what he
Okay.
said, just that it was a negative judgment.
Okay. Did anybody else have any? Okay, thanks, Robert. Did anybody else have any?
I didn't look at the song. I kind of forgot,
Okay.
like,
It's okay.
amongst everything else I have on my plate.
Yeah, no, for sure. Let me just see if I can go into the Shemitah thing here. Can you see this, the notebook, our notebook here now?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so I just wanted to show you that, first of all, I uploaded 2 articles that Robert here wrote. So I encourage you to go and read them. And I also wanted to show you that in the resources section, we have some resources on crop rotation. And who brought in this, this bit about permaculture in Alberta? It might be Alara.
Was that Alara?
Perhaps, yeah, I'll ask her if it was her. I think it might have been her. Because it would be interesting to hear more about what's going on in Alberta with the permaculture scene relating to crop rotation. And so we'll see about that. Okay, so let's go into the source book, and I'll just remind us of where we were last week. We stopped with Deuteronomy, and this is the portion where they start telling us about releasing debt. Okay, and I think everybody read it last time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what's the meaning of debt? What happens when you are in debt, or what's the situation? Like, let's describe it for a moment. What happens here? What are we talking about in this situation?
Basically, you owe somebody something and you don't quite have the resources or whatever to repay that person at that particular moment.
Okay, and how do we get to a situation where we owe somebody money? Like, why are we in that situation?
Income is not sufficient.
Okay, so you don't have enough money, or you don't have enough resources.
Are you talking about in ancient Israel or nowadays or both?
Both. And if you want to differentiate between because I think something that Shemitah teaches us with the idea of cycle is that we need to constantly look at the wider picture, okay? Because we're looking at, the Shemitah isn't a point in time. It's like a whole cycle in time. It's like when we have a menstrual cycle, it's not just the moment that we bleed. there's a whole month of things going on in ourselves that are all connected to each other. So if we're looking at this idea of at the end of the seventh, and it has to be at the end of the seventh year, you let go, you release that. What's the situation? What's the cycle that brings people into a place of debt? So you wanted to say something about the difference between ancient Israel and contemporary debt?
Well, I was sort of imagining a prototype situation in ancient Israel might be if there are bad harvests because of drought or maybe pests or some other biblical sort of thing that might afflict your land, so you don't have the crop that you normally would get income from. And a modern situation would be there might be something like a pandemic that prevents you from going to work, and meanwhile your rent is accruing and you don't have the money to pay your landlord.
So if we're, and I'm just trying to kind of think about it here together with you now. So both of these situations that you described to us, it's like, it's as if your personal ability to make money, or your personal ability to support yourself, is out of sync with something that's happening around you.
Mm-hmm.
At least in the pandemic situation, but like something is out of sync. It seems, it could be described in that way in some situations. Maybe there's different situations, but like there's a general situation, but you have to continue, like everything has stopped, but you have to continue producing money. Are there other ways of describing this, perhaps?
It's a debt cycle. It's a cycle in itself that you get into this, yeah, where you can't get out.
Do you want to say something about that cycle, just so we're all on the same page?
Well, I'm just thinking when you're saying that something's out of whack and, you know, you can't pay it back, I could see that happening to them. And I mean, you still have to eat, you still have to do all the things you need to do, and you just keep getting deeper and deeper in debt. So I can see the sense in there being a release every now and then, because otherwise somebody is always going to be in power and somebody's always going to be struggling.
And similar to the cycle of poverty that's seen with intergenerational poverty continuing.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking also of the situation of loneliness that you might be in because you are out of sync. Now it could be that another 10,000 people next to you are out of sync with what's happening. I mean, again, but I think that in many instances, and you know, there's all these advertisements on the bus stops here about this and this company will help you get out of debt, or there's this feeling of loneliness, like it's you having to struggle by yourself within this wider system. And I think it's true for today. And I have this suspicion that it was true 2,500 years ago in the same way. That in a sense, there's a mistaken feeling that you are on your own when you're in debt, when actually, and I want us to look at this here again in Deuteronomy, maybe it's not just you, maybe you're not on your own, maybe there's a society around you that needs to notice this. Can we see this in any way in the text, or am I just?
Well, and it uses the word brother to your brother.
Yeah.
And the thing about somebody holding somebody else's debt, it's divisive. It's going to be dividing you. You can't really be somebody's true equal brother if you are holding this over them.
Mm-hmm. And looking at verse 8, the patoch פתוח תפתח את ידך והעבט תעביתנו, you're to open your hand, like I'm looking at this twice opening, this, and I could do a kind of a midrash looking at this and saying, maybe this is, because when I was reading it the first time, in the translation, it was almost like it was saying, open your eyes, but it's not, it's open your hand. But it's like the open is perhaps notice. There's this happening on your doorstep. It's your brother. So, and it's also telling the person who is in debt, you're not alone. Somebody is supposed to see you in this situation. Okay, so the person goes into debt or goes into a situation of debt when somebody lent them money. Okay, so there's the institution of lending money. Is there a difference in the meaning in English between lending and borrowing?
Lending
Yeah,
usually
it has to
implies some
do
kind
with
of interest. Borrowing and lending usually. Borrowing is like,
if you're lending, it's that you're
lending is like you're not expecting it back.
Okay, if you're lending.
I would say that lending is the action of the creditor and borrowing is the action of the debtor.
Yeah.
And borrowing to me also implies that you intend to give the item back.
Okay.
So that can be either on the creditor or the debtor side, depending on what the object is.
Because I'm
Because like you can borrow somebody
here, if I noticed correctly, the Hebrew for a loan is halva'a. That's in modern Hebrew. We have a difference between halva'a, you are love halva'a, and that's something that you will give back what it's worth, but not the exact thing, not the exact item. And lish'ol is if for instance, I'm lending a friend of mine my sweater, she's going to return the same sweater to me. Okay, so that's usually would be, but with lilvot, you're giving something away that might come back to you, but not the exact same thing. I was just wondering if in English we have something similar. Okay, so I wanted us to think for a moment here now that we are looking at this idea. And if you look on page 126 in this notebook, in this Shmita notebook, but we can also not look at it for now if you don't have time to look. Can there be a situation of a healthy debt and an unhealthy debt? Can we see two situations? Like why would we need it? And can we see two situations of a healthy and an unhealthy debt? What would constitute a healthy situation of giving and returning, and what would constitute an unhealthy one for society?
Well, like a lot of times when somebody buys a house, they have to have a home loan. So as long as the agreement of that home loan is reasonable for the person buying the house, then that would be considered healthy. I'm thinking of student loan debt and that mess in the US and that debt is, for many people, is unhealthy. Because it's
what makes it unhealthy?
Because of the interest rate and how strict the terms are for repaying it and how much people had to borrow and how large those loans have gotten, especially for medical school.
Okay.
Yeah, you can never really pay them back. It's the same as my house debt is a good debt in my eyes. But if I were to go get a payday loan and it had 50% interest rate on it, it's
predatory loans would be also unhealthy.
But also I was thinking of when you said, is there good debt and bad debt? If somebody is always the taker and somebody's always the giver, I think that's not healthy. You need to be able to, even in your own way, even if you can't give back money, maybe you have some kind of barter system.
Mhm.
I'm thinking here in town, I remember a story of there was a doctor who would deliver people's babies. He went around town. This was about 100 years ago, but my grandpa's about that old, so he tells this story. And he would help, people would help him build his house, or people would give him some of their crop or whatever. They had to give back in their own way to make them feel like they had dignity.
Mhm. Okay, so you see that as a healthy exchange, and I'm thinking of the word dignity that you used here, and I want us to just look here for a moment. I'm just jumping here, and I want us to keep this in the back of our mind. I'm back in the notebook again, and I just took here from Leviticus. For it is to me that the Israelites are servants; they are my servants, whom I freed from the land of Egypt. I Adonai, your God. Okay, so in a sense, I think part of the idea of Shemitah, when we go into the Shemitah of money, okay, the Shemitah of debt, comes back to this situation where we are, when you are in debt to a human, he owns you in a sense. You become that person's slave in a sense, okay, in a spiritual sense. Sometimes in actual sense, okay, in some places and in some times, if you owed someone money, they actually own.
This is exactly how loan sharks talk about it.
About
At least
owning
that's,
someone.
or at least that's what they talk. I've never had personal interaction with loan sharks, but in gangster movies.
Nachon. Exactly. And I think not just in
But yeah,
gangster movies.
and it certainly in ancient Israel very much
You're
linked with
breaking.
slavery.
Robert, we
What,
can't
if
hear
you
you.
could-
You're disappearing.
Is it okay now?
It's okay now, yeah. But you were
I'm still not, huh?
sort of, yeah. Do you want to turn your video off? It sometimes helps. So
Is that any better?
could be. Let's try.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, I just said that it certainly in biblical times the consequence of debt was slavery.
Exactly. Nachon. And I think even to these days, in many instances, at least the emotional aspect of it. And actually, you were talking about dignity and about people feeling they need to repay, so they don't belong, or something in them has to be released from the person. Torah keeps reminding us that we were taken out of Egypt, we were taken out of slavery on its many levels, and we need to remember we are only slaves, or we are only enslaved. And let's find a new word for that, but we'll use this for a moment because of the biblical reference to Adonai, which is also why Tanakh doesn't really like kings, because kings are only stand-ins for the real king, okay, the real ruler of the world. Humans cannot be kings for, in a sense, in this sense, to other humans. They only stand in for Adonai. And any debt we owe, both as the ones who owe the debt and both as the people who gave the money, okay? We're actually in a sort of game that we're not really supposed to be in, because the only slavery that is allowed, in a sense, is with Adonai. So this is sitting behind the whole thinking of Shemitah, both in the money aspect and the land aspect. We always have to go back to this to understand that all these structures, in a sense, are enslaving us, and that is a crime against our relationship with Adonai. Okay, so it's not just a human problem, it's also a human, God problem. It's a theological problem. a place that allows ongoing debt. Okay, בסדר? So I just brought something here, and it's my translation. I apologize for this translation, but I just wanted us to see this for a moment. Would somebody like to read this bit here? And then we'll go back into debt, but it kind of tied in for me with this idea.
I can go ahead and read it.
Okay.
During the Shemitah, an Israelite lets go of the land from where he was taken, into which he will return. Translated into a contemporary tongue, we can say that during the Shemitah year, a person must disengage from his day-to-day, from his daily work, from his computer screen, from his house of business. He should dedicate the year to humanity, to fulfill his social responsibility. And that's from Avid HaKohen in 2011.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Okay. So this year on the economic and the agricultural level, we're supposed to rededicate ourselves to working for humanity, with humanity, to being fully human again, and to be fully social again. Okay, because that is a form of worship. So, but having said that, I want us to go back for a moment and look again at some rabbinic writings about the question of why we give loans, why we lend. Okay, what does this do to? Why do we get to this situation at all? Okay, and what they thought about lending money. So, can someone read this brown bit here first from the Babylonian Talmud, Shabbat? Rabbi Abba said.
I can try. My kids are being quiet enough.
Okay.
Rabbi Abba said that Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish said, one who loans another money is greater than one who gives him charity. And the one who places money into a common purse, i.e. one who enters into a partnership with a needy person, is the greatest of them all, since in that case, the needy person is not embarrassed when receiving the assistance.
Okay, so what does this tell us here? What are they trying to, first of all, notice something that just a moment of looking at rabbinic conversation. Rabbi Abba said that Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish said. So this is the quote, okay? He's quoting him. Because whenever it's like putting a footnote in an academic work, okay? If you heard something from someone else, you have to bring it in their name. So Rabbi Abba said he learned this from Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish. And why is one who loans another money greater, the one who gives him charity?
Giving them that option to pay it back.
Yeah. And also sometimes people
it seems to have to do with dignity.
With dignity. We're constantly coming back to this word today, right? Dignity. Why does it have to do with dignity?
Sometimes somebody who receives charity feels embarrassed for wanting to take charity from somebody else.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So, and yeah.
That's basically the dignity aspect, is the embarrassment of like, oh, now I'm needing to ask people to give me money without any expectation for me paying it back.
And in a way they're saying, I know you can pay this back. You can't right now, but I know that you're good for it. You'll do it eventually.
Okay, so in a sense, it's maintaining your belief that this person is, you're maintaining your belief in this person's abilities. So they see this again as a place of dignity, which is important, okay? Because I think the idea of shmitat ksefim, of letting go of the whole system of a healthy system of debt or a healthy system of lending money, and also in it, this kind of place of letting go, of releasing debt, always goes back to the word dignity, to the word human dignity and social dignity. Throughout the system, because remember, we're talking about cycles, not just about one moment of releasing debt. So the debt that we are going to release has to be a debt that is healthy, that sees the dignity of the person, and then when it needs to be released, still sees the dignity of the person. Does anybody want to read from the Rambam here, from Maimonides, from his Mishneh Torah? There are 8 levels of tzedakah.
I can.
I can read that.
Okay.
There are 8 levels of tzedakah. Is my voice coming up?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. There are 8 levels of tzedakah, each one greater than the other. The greatest level, higher than all the rest, is to fortify a fellow Jew and give him a gift, a loan, form with him a partnership, or find work for him until he is strong enough so that he does not need to ask others for sustenance. Of this it is said, Leviticus 25, if your kinsman being in straits comes under your authority and you hold him as though a resident alien, let him live by your side. That is, as if to say, hold him up so that he will not fall and be in need.
Okay, so let's notice 2 things here. First of all, Rambam goes back to this distinction of fellow Jews and non-Jews, which, again, I think when we are going to think of our Shemitah project, this wouldn't make sense in our situation, but let's just notice that when he's saying that, he's probably meaning people that are in your society, people that you feel connected to. Again, for us, that wouldn't make sense because we're connected also outside of the Jewish community. And I think in our days and times, we know that this interconnectedness, I mean, if we let other people fall, we're all going to fall. So I also want, but I really want us to look at this, hold him up so that he will not fall and be in need. So what does this actually mean? What is he trying to prevent here? If I'm going back to the cycle, what are we trying to do here?
We're trying to bring up everybody to the same level so that everybody is an autonomous economic actor rather than some people being dependents on others.
Okay, so the ideal situation, according to Rambam,
Chronically.
at least from what I understand here, we do not want people to be in need. Okay, that's where we want to get to. So you will do things that will enable people not to be in need. So charity isn't going to do that, but lending somebody money or going into business with them or supporting them in a way that will enable them to support themselves will hopefully build a society that's strong enough where people won't be in need. Okay, so that's why I think they would prefer lending rather than charity. That's why lending is the highest level of tzedakah according to the Rambam. And there, as he said, there's 8 levels, and we once looked at them. We should look at them again just to remember, but not today. Okay. Anything anyone wants to say about this bit? Something that's come up for you, or?
I love it. Just the holding up reminds me of the social safety net that we try to have now for people who fall through the cracks, and that they were doing that for each other.
And it's also could be used as an argument for a basic level of income for everybody, like a standard income level for everybody that everybody gets up to a certain income level, but it's an argument for that.
I think in a sense today, it would also for me be an argument to creating an economy that makes sure that people have, like, I think maybe I'm taking, we could argue, but I think if we outsource all of our food, then we're actually not allowing people in our own communities to make a living out of producing food, for instance. So we're actually not helping this happen. We're actually causing people to fall and be in need. And the same goes for any other type of commerce, perhaps. And I would maybe translate a fellow Jew here. And I'm not, I think borders have to stay open and commerce has to happen. But when I'm looking at the people who are close to us, our city, the area, the country we live in, these are the people that we have to look to, perhaps, to make sure they have the ability to maintain themselves. That could be a reading of this. Perhaps people have other readings of it.
I can see that as well. I go to the farmer's market as often as I need to. It's a way of supporting more local agriculture rather than international or even national level.
So maybe we could put the word local here instead of fellow Jew. For our needs today. Again, of course, we're not gonna, boycott things from other countries, but our first thing we need to do is look at the local level, perhaps. Any other thoughts?
Well, just to affirm that idea, so a contrary argument would be, well, then you're impoverishing some non-local people. But actually, when money circulates within an economy, it has a multiplier effect. So it actually generates more wealth in the aggregate than if the money gets siphoned off to some other place and is taken out of the economy.
Why?
So the aggregate wealth is actually greater when money circulates in a local economy.
Why is that?
Corporations hoard money, not spend it.
So I don't have enough economics to explain it in detail, but it's called the multiplier effect for yeah.
So
I'll tell you what, I'll look it up and come back with a report for next time.
Miranda, you maybe had...
Basically, what happens is when you support a small business, you're directly helping those people who own that small business be able to afford their own needs, so food, rent, whatever, childcare, what have you. Mm-hmm. And because they're supporting themselves, that helps everybody in their circle that they go to. Okay. But as soon as you start spending money at a corporation, so like Save on Foods, Sobeys, Safeway, Walmart, that's going to the corporation. That corporation may be national or international. It's going out. It's not getting recirculated back in.
Okay.
And basically, the corporation's using the money you spend at them to pay the employees. Yes, it will probably might go back into the local economy, but reality, it's going to be spent to fund their CEOs and heads of the corporation more so than the employees.
Okay. So we'll stop this here for a moment, but this is interesting. For me, this is interesting. I mean, it would be interesting to maybe bring in someone to open this up with us. One meeting. We'll skip this for a moment. I just wanted us to go and look at the Posbul, because that's important. And then we'll go back to the Gemilut Chassidim, to the Gemach. So what happened was, and there was a question that came up, did the Shemitah ever happen? Like, did people do Shemitah? And apparently they probably did. And we know it by this situation. So let's just go back here for a moment. And see what might happen. Okay, what are we worried about here? And what we might be worried about is Here, take you care lest there be a word in your heart, a base one, saying the 7th year, the year of release is nearing, and your eye be set on ill toward your brother, the needy one, and you not give to him, so that he calls out because of you to Adonai, and sin be incurred by you. So what would happen was they noticed that when the 7th year was approaching, people stopped lending money because they knew the 7th year was coming. Nobody was going to give them any money back. So there was a situation. So then we have here in the Mishnah, we have the pozbul, which is from the Greek. It's a Greek word, or it's a Greek, putting together a few Greek words. But they're not sure about the meaning. There's a few questions about what it actually meant. Does somebody want to read from the Mishnah here at the bottom? A loan secured by a pozbul.
A loan secured by a pozbul. Sorry, I'm
Yeah,
slaughtering
pozbul is a strange word. It's okay.
Pronunciation. It's not canceled. This was one of the things enacted by Hillel the elder. For when he observed people refraining from lending to one another and thus transgressing what is written in the Torah, beware lest you harbor the base thought. The 7th year, the year of remission, is approaching, so that you are mean to your needy kinsman and give him nothing. Hillel enacted the pozbul. This is the formula of the pozbul. I turn over to you, so-and-so, judges of such and such a place, that any debit that I may have outstanding, I shall collect it whenever I desire, and the judge sign below, or the witnesses.
Okay, so what happens with the debt of the Shemitah is the debt doesn't disappear. It still exists, but you're not allowed to collect it, okay? So what happens is the person who owes you money has to remember out of the goodness of their own heart and their ability to repay. So that works when people are, are behaving as they should. But if there's a situation where people can't pay or people use the system to borrow money but not return it, then the system breaks down. People stop lending money. People get into really difficult debt. There's a lot of chaos. So Hillel is from the end of the Second Temple period. That's Hillel Hazaken from the houses of Shammai and Hillel, right? That's the Hillel we're talking about. They created the system of the pozbul, which was very radical and was not accepted. I mean, it was accepted, but not everyone accepted it because it was actually going against the actual words of Torah. And what he says there is, if you have a debt before the end of the time that you need to return, that the person needs to return your debt, you move over your debt to a court. So it's not between you and that person anymore, but between the person and the court. Okay, and then they owe the court an explanation. They owe the court money, and then the debt isn't released because the whole system of releasing debt for Shemitah is a peer-to-peer situation. It doesn't go through a court. And if you want, we can go into this Mishnah next time and really go and learn it, okay, and look at it. Because it's interesting in a few instances. First of all, because this question of peer-to-peer rather of a peer through system, a person through system, which is the court. Also, there's a question of did the pozbul does it actually work? And if you want to look at more information about the pozbul, you can go to page 48 in your source sheets here, and they have a whole description here of the pozbul, so maybe people can read it for next time, okay? And then we can talk more about it and kind of really go into it. Another reason the pozbul is interesting is because we have evidence here that we have rabbinic, we have halacha that goes against the law of Torah. Okay, so that's pretty interesting to see that because the times were changing. I just wanted us to notice one thing, kind of to send us off. So this is homework to look into the pozbul and learn it, and then next time we'll talk more about the pozbul. One thing that's important to notice, just interesting to look at, is the whole the whole idea of gamach coming out of this idea of giving, of lending being a mitzvah, okay? Lending as the highest form of tzedakah. And gamach is an abbreviation of gemilut chasadim, which are actions of chesed, of loving kindness. And if you, I put some links here to the whole idea, all the institutions of gamach that have been created. I also put here resources for Alberta. You'll see the Edmonton Jewish Free Loans Association, which is part of a much wider network of free loan associations. And I would encourage you to go and read about them, just because it's interesting. And because it sits on this idea of a healthy, or hopefully creating a healthy debt system, or a healthy lending system. Another interesting thing about gamachs, and I just put one example. Let's see if you can open it up and you can see it. No. Gamach is not only about money, it's also about giving articles, like things to people that they can use and return, or they can use and make. So in Israel, it's very popular. I'm sure that in other big places with a big Jewish, many Jews, it would also be popular. For instance, in Israel, you have a whole gamachs that are for brides' dresses. So if brides don't have money, you go and they don't ask you why. You can go and you borrow a dress for the evening, and then you don't have to pay for it. You give it back.
Literally, you wear a wedding dress once and you never use it again. Perfect.
And some brides just donate their wedding dresses after the wedding to the gamach. I was just trying to remember, I asked Ariel before, he's sitting here behind me. When our daughter was born, our eldest daughter was born, we borrowed, there's a huge gamach in Israel for medical supplies and for all sorts. So we borrowed a baby's crib for the first month. We didn't want to buy a little crib. We knew we would only use it for a month, and we were waiting to buy her a larger bed when she grew. So you could just borrow a little crib for a tiny baby and give it back to them afterwards. So people can use it for, and they never ask you, it's just about making sure everyone is able to, and then you can contribute to it and you can enjoy it. And it's all about, it's about supporting each other when people need. And it's about, and I think I'm going back to this idea of dignity. When you're lending a bride a dress and not asking her why, that's about the dignity of the person. Okay, so they can feel good about how they are on that day. So it's not just about money, but you can go read about these different things. And this is also important for us when we're thinking about Alberta and about our communities here, how this could be implemented and is already implemented. So if people can add resources for Alberta for any of these things, it would be very beneficial and very interesting. But the homework is to go and read about the Pulsboard. Okay, that's just tougher. So yeah, any questions, thoughts, comments before we end tonight? Okay, good. So I'll see you next week. And if you have any questions, just write. And if you have any information, just put it on here. And if anybody knows someone who can give us some more information about the local economy and why it's actually more beneficial from a money sense, then that would be very, very good. So, okay, Yossi. So I hope you all have a good week. Okay, so I'm gonna